What? We have a real life solar superhero in the house. Carter Lavin is here from the California Solar and Storage Association, and we're going to talk NEM 3.0. You do not want to miss this conversation if you're in the solar industry. See you soon. 60 seconds, baby. We are live. Thanks everyone for being here. Another week, another edition of the Solar Academy webinar. I am Solar Joe, and we are going live from the Solar Objections Facebook group, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So check us out. Go ahead in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from, what city, and what streaming you're coming from. What's up, everybody? And today, as you can see, we have Carter Lavin, who is a member or is a member recruiter.
Membership director with the California Solar and Storage Association. Hey, it's great to be here.
Solar Storage Association, baby. And he's here to talk about NEM 3.0, how it's going to affect California and the rest of the world. Carter, thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you so much for having me. This is extremely exciting to chat with you and chat with all of you all listening about, frankly, it's the biggest thing happening to rooftop solar, residential solar in America. So
yeah, and I'm excited to talk to you and get you, the audience, to hear what you're about. Before we get started, everybody watching, don't forget, if you want your name shown, click on the bottom of the post on the StreamYard's link to give us permission to show your name, or you can say Facebook user. So go ahead, click on the link and show us your name, and then we can have a great conversation. So get in the comments, get engaged, say what's up. And Carter, tell us a little about you, man. You know, not everybody knows what you do and where you're from, how you got to where you are, man.
Yeah, so I've been in the solar industry for 16 years. I started as a teenager, did solar sales, commercial sales, marketing for manufacturers, service providers, battery companies. For the last 6.5 years, I've been at the California Solar and Storage Association, CalSA. So we are the political arm of the solar industry, the political voice here in California. So we go toe-to-toe with the utilities politically because they know they're having a hard time competing with you all economically, so they figure they'll do this stuff. My role, pretty simple. I get people politically engaged. I talk to folks saying like, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what the utilities are trying to do. We host a bunch of rallies. If so there's probably a lot of you listening who have this yellow shirt from the January rallies. We'll talk about that. And there's some red shirts out there too. But so yeah, my job is basically help lead the fight and keep this market going and growing.
Let me jump right in and start off right off the bat. And everybody, please, if you have questions, jump in and ask questions, because I'm not gonna have all the questions you guys don't have to ask. But my first question comes up right away because you said it. You said the utilities look at solar as the competitor, as the enemy. And I don't actually do that myself. When I look at the utility, I look at it as we're partnering with them. We're working with them. We're figuring out another plan for homeowners. They have different programs, right? They have a program you can rent electricity. They have a program where you can generate your own electricity. And it's not about them being bad. It's about the homeowners choosing the right program was best for them. So tell me a little bit about how that relationship works better, if you can.
Sure. So PG&E, Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric in California, and your utility, there's people across the country, your utilities across the country as well. Those three in California spend literally millions of dollars a year on lobbying and PR to get elected officials and regulators to make solar harder in California. So, there's times where we do collaborate with them, things like interconnection reform, but really, they're pushing things like net metering, they're pushing solar taxes. That is not the acts of someone who's trying to work with us. And so, the utilities every now and then might do a pilot project, things like that. They're generally very interested in the solar that they own. So when it's a utility scale solar plant in the middle of the desert, that's wonderful. Solar that you, Joe, helped put on like someone's home in Fresno, you're saving someone on their electric bill, and they're the people who send you an electric bill. They don't like sending someone a lower electric bill. And so they spend millions of dollars a year on lobbying. There's tons of fights that they do that way. There's all this like attack ads that they do talking about solar billionaires and net metering and trying to scare people away from solar and trying to scare politicians and regulators into beating up on you and not me and the folks listening in.
So you talk about the utilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
But these are not all the utilities of even California, right? These are the major utilities that cover large areas. How about other utilities? And I don't want to get too much into the weeds. I know you have a presentation for us, but I'm just curious about, is it all the utilities? Is it just the big utilities? Is it, the mom and pop utilities the same?
So, there's the utilities have their own association, the Edison Institute, EEI, and they have explicitly identified like net metering as one of the like biggest existential threats to utilities. Years ago, they started pumping out stuff about the utility death spiral, and if everyone goes solar, that's going to drive utilities out of business. And it has been a coordinated effort. When you look at Florida or Arizona and Nevada, Hawaii, I think Indiana just passed an anti-net metering thing. Like utilities, we're presented with the new century. We're presented with, do we want to have an electric grid where that's distributed, where people have control of their power and the utilities are an even player with all the customers, with all the solar pros, or does all the solar industry go out of business and the utilities stay in control? Frankly, they're century-year-old monopoly. The concept of evolving and changing is a little hard, and some of them do better than others. Like I think Green Mountain Power in Vermont has done some okay things, and utilities have changed. So like back in the day, when 16 years ago, when I was first in solar, there were some municipal utilities in California that were interested in rooftop solar, and then they've changed their tune over time. So, generally speaking, it's all, it's money, and money is politics, and politics is money. And at the end of the day, if you're saving someone money on their electric bill, that's someone who is getting paid less money, and they're not happy about that. And so, PG&E can either lower their rates and offer a better product at a better price and drive every solar contractor out of business, which would be hard for them to do, and they're not doing that, and they have all the other things, or they could politically mobilize to drive this industry out of business and make solar illegal. And frankly, they think it's going to be easier to do that second one. So that's why we as solar folks have to fight back. And so, there's a lot of folks who are new to solar thinking, hey, this is good. Electricity, energy, it's inherently political because it's inherently about who has power, who has money, how does that work? It's like, particularly I once talked to a solar guy who used to be in plumbing, and we had this like great talk about this because he was a plumber, and he's like, I'm really good at contracting and showing up on time and doing complicated things well. And he's like, I don't get the solar stuff. And we talked, and he's like, yeah, no one's trying to make plumbing illegal. Like there's no anti-plumbing lobby. And I was like, oh yeah, no, solar. There's like, I've been doing this for 16 years. Like there's attack ads, there's anti-solar attacks. They're gross. And this is why we have to fight back. And
it reminds me of like a taxi company who is anti-owning cars.
Yeah.
It probably makes sense. And I tell homeowners, would you ask a taxi company advice on how to buy a car?
Yeah.
What kind of advice would they would give you? And that's usually a good analogy. They kind of understand.
Yeah. Well, and it's also one of those like, it's at the end of the day, if you're going solar and the people in the chat and listening in, they do the math all day long for folks. Like solar is a great deal. And I wish we could do the solar equivalent for everything else. If you could do, solar for your gas, if you're like, wow, I spend X amount of money and I saved it for 25 years. Like, I wish I could do that for my health insurance. I wish I could do that for my gas. I wish I could do it for my rent. Like, I wish I could do it for everything.
We get that all the time, especially with PG&E. And they're like, I want to get rid of the whole PG&E. I tell homeowners, as soon as we get gas panels, you'll be the first one on the list.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you mentioned something earlier really quick. And I know I keep asking questions because I'm really into this stuff. And
of course. Yeah.
and I really wanted to get you on for a while. And Danny Pesty, I got to give a shout out. Mr. Pestman gave me your contact. I was really excited to get you on after that, so I appreciate it. It looks like we got some questions coming in. But my question first, because I'm hosting right now.
There we go.
You mentioned earlier, you kind of said it sneakily, but I want to kind of more into it. Solar taxes.
Yeah.
How are they doing that? What are they doing? And how is it sneaky, or is there something well known?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the whole net metering 3 situation. So right now, just to kind of recap, if the solar industry is fish, if we're in net metering is the water that we're in. It's the concept that when you make power and you send it back to the grid and you get a credit on your bill, that's net metering. How much you get, all that stuff, that's all part of net metering. But like, are you allowed to send power back to the grid? Yes, no. Do you get compensated at a fair rate? In California, originally years ago, you used to get 1-to-1. Like if you got retail credit back. That was NEM 1. Then we went to NEM 2 6 years ago. Whole fight then, which we won, and it's retail rate minus a penny or two. The utilities come back and say, no, you should get 4 cents, 5 cents for what you send back to the grid, regardless of if we're charging you 30 cents. If they want solar users to get about 5 cents, and they want to put on these taxes for there's potentially self-consumption charges, which is kind of a bizarre concept. But this is all part of this whole NEM 3 process, which is coming to a head basically the next 2-3 months. So we're doing a series of rallies throughout the state of California. We need people calling the governor. There's a lot in there, but yeah, the state of California back in December proposed a $8 per kilowatt per month fee on every residential solar customer. So if you're selling a 6 kilowatt system, 6 times 8, $48 a month for a year, that gets to
plus the original fee. Plus
that was the original thing. Yeah, plus the monthly fees, plus all of this. And on top of that, lowering the value of the power that you send to the grid to 5 cents. So instead of getting 26 cents, let's say you're San Diego Gas and Electric, you're getting 30 cents a kilowatt hour is what you're offsetting. And let's say it's Sunday, you're not at home, you're in the park, your system's producing, you're sending power back to the grid, and you'd only get 5 cents credited. That's absurd. It's something that back in December, the payback period under the original NEM 3 that was put out was a 20-year payback. That going solar on a 6 kilowatt system is a 20-year payback. And I know, Joe, I know you train folks. I know a lot of the folks here, great salespeople. I'm sure some of you could sell a 20-year payback. I'm sure some of you are great at it. But this industry does 130,000 projects a year throughout California. And if there's 20-year payback as opposed to 6-year payback, if 20-year payback was the average, that market would go away. And so that's why we flipped out. And that's why we flipped out, pushed back really hard. And back in May, there were some changes to those changes proposed. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Let me play a little devil's advocate.
Okay.
Let's look at the side of the utility and see where their perspective is, because they do have a side, right? Like they're not just a bunch of dumb people. Like they have reasons and they explain things.
Yeah, they're very smart people. There are lots of things, but one of them is very smart.
Very smart. And if we want to play devil's advocate, they have a very expensive infrastructure that took them years, 100 years to build.
Yeah, and they're guaranteed they're guaranteed a profit on everything they build. Poor babies.
They're guaranteed a profit.
They're guaranteed a profit, literally in their state authorization to exist. Their legal guaranteed monopoly is that they get a profit off of everything they build. So they build a transmission line, they charge us all. That's not out of PG&E's pocket. That's out of my pocket. I'm a ratepayer. I pay for that. And they add some cream on the top of that to compensate them for that. And that's what they do. So a big part about solar is when everyone gets solar, when everyone goes energy efficient, they don't need to build so much stuff because we're doing it ourselves. It's like if everyone starts working from home, you don't need to expand the highways. And that's great. That's a highly efficient system. People are saving money. It's neighbors are sending power to neighbors as opposed to doing gigantic power lines in from God knows where, lighting all sorts of things on fire in the event of issues, preserving open spaces. That's good, except for if you're the people who make money by building new transmission lines. You don't like that. And one of my favorite things about this is a couple of years ago, PG&E, I think it was one of the utilities, put out a press release bragging about how they just save ratepayers, me and you, we're ratepayers, a bunch of money because so many people got local solar, so many people went solar. PG&E was able to cancel, or one of the utilities canceled like some project thing, and they put out a press release, and then the kind of press release disappeared because we're like, hey, that's exactly our point. Thank you so much for putting that out. And I think and especially for those of you who are newer to the space, and this is all very confusing because you're like, what's happening? A big thing to keep in mind is utilities make money, at least in California, they make money off of what they build, less so off of what they generate. So it's more about, are they continuously building new power lines, substations, that kind of stuff? And if they don't need to do that, then they don't make so much money. And so one thing that they talk about is they're like, well, we're making all this stuff, we got to charge people. And we say, it's like, well, you don't actually have to make so much of that stuff. And also, fun fact, if we're electrifying everything and making like every car an EV, which is like huge amount of power needs, like we need every kilowatt hour we could possibly get. We need all the energy we can possibly get in California, because guess what? PG&E, like my bill, I lost power a few days ago. I live in Oakland. Like I'm in a major city in America, 400 something thousand people. We lost power for hours and hours. Like the utilities are having a hard time keeping the grid on. It's like, well, wouldn't it be nice if we had our own solar and our own battery in my
That's the part I can't get, right? Like solar is actually helping the grid when they need the help the most in the middle of the summer when the ACs are blasting, right? Like, so how is that a bad thing for the grid? That's the question I have usually.
Well, so you've said a very important thing. You said, how is that a bad thing for a grid? An important thing to keep in mind is the grid and the utilities are not the same thing. It's like saying like, yeah, it's good for the grid, but the utilities aren't the grid. The utilities are for-profit corporations that maintain the grid, and they do a lot of other stuff. They want you to think they're synonymous with them and anything that they advocates for that, but it's not. Those are different things. And that's frankly a big part is like right now, let's say if you're a utility in California and hypothetically there's lots of forest fires going on that hypothetically are lit because of transmission lines, and there's all sorts of evidence around this. You would like to not be causing these forest fires. And so a big thing that you say is to the state of California, it's like, hey, can you give us a couple $1 billion? We'll bury every power line. That's one option. Another option is we say, hey, well, what if we put solar and storage throughout all these rural communities? And so we could just shut down the power lines and restructure this entirely. So we don't need those. And right now, that's a not comfortable conversation for the utilities to have, because we're a viable alternative. Like we've kind of changed up the I'm being recorded, so I'm going to not use the metaphors I typically do, but like they're not the only game in town. And that's a big thing that I think it's really important for regulators and politicians to kind of understand. And that's a big part about the rallies and being in person and showing up at all these places to really help. Like everyone who knows solar says like, oh yeah, well, the future is going to have solar panels in every house, batteries in every garage, every apartment. We're going to do this. We're going to do it. And fun fact about how politics work, like governments can make things illegal. Governments can't, any of you who sold, I'm assuming a lot of your folks have sold batteries so far, right? Anyone who sold a battery could tell you, anyone who's actually sold and gotten it installed can tell you, fire code is a huge thing. You can say like, look, here's the economics. I'm going to sell you the thing. If fire code is such that you can't put a battery anywhere in the house because it's got to be so far from windows and yada, 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 doesn't matter. You can't put it anywhere. And so, the utilities, they're many things. They're very smart. They're not going to say, hey, I don't like Joe, his face, his haircut, I don't like him. I'm going to put Joe out of business. What they're going to say is like, no, Joe's not paying his fair share. We're like, his fair share of what? It's like, oh, of our profits. It's like, okay, so, and they're like, so Joe, we gotta, Joe, you gotta pay up more. You gotta pay your fair share. You're like, okay, fine. I'll work with you. We're cool. What's up? And like, your fair share is 20-year payback. You're like, that's starting in January. You're like, wait, no, that's not like a compromise of us as equals. And so this is
came in really quick. I kind of want to go too far. He jumped in. Scott Kelly said, if the utility companies can't keep up, that's their problem. They like free market capitalism until it works against them. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is what's the saying? It's a free market's a great idea. Someone should try it one day. But like at the end of the day, utilities are regulated by the Utility Commission because utilities are multi-billion-dollar monopolies. They're very politically strong. They're very politically savvy, and this is the role of government to say like, hey guys, maybe behave a little bit better. Because at the end of the day, they have you over a barrel. They feel like they got you under control. And a big part about solar is we're the escape valve. If there wasn't a solar industry, if there wasn't energy efficiency and utilities keep jacking up prices, what's someone going to do? Like sit alone in the dark? No, we show up and we say, hey, we got options. But also this is a big role of government in saying like, hey, utilities, you can't charge someone that amount of money. Like you just can't do it. So when PG&E wants to raise their rates, what they do, for example, is they have to say, hey, state of California, I'd like to raise our rates because X, Y, and Z, and wouldn't it be nice, and please do it. So there is a government watchdog, the Utility Commission. They're the ones who make the decision. They're the referees here. And a big part of what's happening is that they need to be stepping in a larger way. And frankly, the governor, Gavin Newsom, who appoints the commissioners, needs to give them stronger direction, saying like, hey guys, the utilities aren't playing fair. As Scott's saying, the utilities are trying to take their ball and go home, and they're like, oh, it's a free market. Oh wait, no, the solar industry is going and growing, and 150,000 people, like middle class people in Fresno and Bakersfield are getting solar gobs and gobs. Like you all listening in or talking in, like you're selling the projects. It's not just it's not rich random people in Berkeley going solar. It's like everybody going solar, and the utilities are realizing like, oh shoot, this is big, and they're trying to basically say to the government like, hey, please give the utilities permission to shut down this market. Please give the utilities permission to change the facts, change the rules, change the stuff, shut down the market. And what we're doing is we're telling the governor, the Utility Commission, hey, step in, save solar, because this is what we need to do. And if Gavin Newsom's not hearing from you all, if you all are not showing up at rallies, then they're not going to step in. There's a lot of other things in the news these days. And Gavin Newsom, he's the governor of the world's 5th largest economy. He's got some priorities. And so if he doesn't feel like, oh, this solar thing, this net metering thing is a big deal, is top on his radar, is something that people are going to remember him by, he's got other stuff to do, and the thing that, for Joe, like you and like the folks you're training, you're used to these conversations all the time. Like solar, everyone says like, well, solar sells itself. It does, but you still need the person to like remind the homeowners like, hey, you like this? Like, hey, knock, knock. Don't you want to save on your electric bill? It's really easy. You still have to do it, even though it saves itself and it sells itself. So like, in one hand, like there's 70,000 people in California who work in solar. There's 1.3 million Californians who have solar. 130,000 go solar every year, and about 70% of that would all be trash starting in January if the utilities get their way. So you'd say, okay, well, it sounds like it's a pretty easy thing for the governor to step in and say, hey, commission, don't. But much like you all with your sales, like we have to consistently remind the governor and remind the Utility Commission to save my solar job, to save this industry.
I wish I had Gavin Newsom's ear. I'll tell you, just give me 5 minutes. I'll definitely change his mind about the California law, but that's another conversation.
Well, no, but it actually isn't. It is actually this conversation, because a big part about if you're a politician and if you are the governor of 30, 40 million person state, the big thing is like, how do you make something on their radar? And this is why, back in January or back in December, when the proposal first came out, CALSA, the California Solar and Storage Association, in association with our allies at the Solar Rights Alliance, delivered 120,000 petition comments to the governor's office. I physically unloaded the boxes from the truck of the comments to the governor's office and the Utility Commission. That's like, hey, yeah, I know you're not listening to Joe. You're not having the 5 minutes of Joe. Here's 120,000 Californians weighing in on this thing. And then the commission did their thing. And so in January, we had 1,000 people in LA and 1,000 people in SF, a little bit more in both places, in the streets, in front of the Utility Commission, wearing the yellow shirts and saying, hey, get this in the news, hear about us. Because, like Gavin Newsom, he cares about you as a person, generally speaking. We all care about each other, kumbaya, all that stuff. What they really care about also is when 100,000 people or 150,000 people speak out in a unified voice, which is why I don't know if I could put a thing. Well, you'll send like an email in the chat, but like right now, the thing to do is we need people signing the petition at savecaliforniasolar.org, because that gets people plugged in. So anyone in California, everyone in California needs to be signing that petition. If you work in solar, and if anything I've said today right now has gotten you a little bit nervous about the future, the number one thing you can do is get people to sign that petition. Because once people...
SaveCaliforniaSolar.org?
Yes, savecaliforniasolar.org. I'm also going to grab my little whiteboard. I have a second thing. It's not going to come back. But so the big part about signing the petition is, one, we consistently deliver that to the governor and the utility commission. So that just shows them, it's 150,000 people have signed that by now. And so the more people sign it, the better we're showing the will of the people. The other thing is that plugs folks in. So when we need to send an email saying like, hey, call the governor, we can do that. So 2 weeks ago, we shut down the governor's phone line because we had so many people calling him. We had, I think, over 1,000 people call him that day. That's how you get this message done. And the other thing, hello. I'm very excited.
Good.
The other thing that we got coming up is we're doing this. Here's how this works. We're doing a 7-city media roadshow. So San Diego to Chico, and we could put this in the chat or whatever the thing is. Come on out. So some of you don't have the yellow shirts because you didn't come to SF or LA in January. We're coming to you, Palm Springs, Bakersfield, Fresno, San Luis Obispo, Santa Cruz, Chico. The big thing is we need folks there. We need this to be both solar users, solar salespeople, solar installers, everybody, because right now, that's how you get it on the radar. That's how you say, hey, look, California says, obviously this is a bad idea. Obviously we should not be taxing solar. And so we got to show up and get loud. So here are the dates. I'll put a thing in the chat later about that. But yeah, it's a lot going on. I got a thing. Carl, I'll be at the California Solar meeting in August. Yeah. Oh, hey, Justin. Franklin WH, I'll be there. CalSA has a bunch of chapter meetings for members. It is a lot of my social calendar. Mainly, I'm looking at the 7 cities in the next 10 days. The concept of August will exist. I'm sure it'll be fun. But considering I'm about to do the longest road trip of my entire life, I'm going to have a lot of road time. So, send over your podcast recommendation or whatever.
Sorry to hijack your whole presentation. And
it was basically this. I had more pictures, but it's basically this. So this is great.
So everybody, thanks for the comment. Scott Kelly, thanks for the comment. More questions, come on in if you have any. I'm sure you guys have a bunch of questions on this. You guys aren't all experts on this. Yeah. I can tell you that right now. But Scott Kelly wants to know, would politicians pay attention if we bought them like utility companies do? Good question, Scott.
Yeah, so there's a whole lot in that question. So let's put it this way. Politicians and regulators, they want to do their job. Much like you want to do your job, Joe wants to do his job, I want to do my job. We all want to do our job. We're all trying our hardest. People also want to win re-election. People also want to do what's right. A big thing is, it's not like, I forgot what that, it's not like the old timey movies where people show up with money bags with dollar signs, like, hey, politician. No, what happens is the utility commission says, for example, the utility commission opened up the net metering 3 process. The utilities are able to churn out tons and tons of research reports because they have the money to just be like, boom, research report, because they fund that. And so it's not like, politicians aren't bought and paid for in that type of way. That first time I think about it, is people have friends and they make friends. However, at the end of the day, a big part is seeing is solar popular? And I know a lot of you are probably rolling your eyes because you're like, yeah, solar's popular. I literally make a living off of solar being popular. Duh. Does your mayor know that? Does your state senator know that? Does your state assembly member know who you are? Fun fact, you have a state assembly member. And I think a big thing that folks who work in solar, especially the newbies, and frankly, some of the folks who've been around for a while, that you kind of need remembering is your elected officials don't know you. They don't know you. You need to introduce yourself. You need to introduce yourself lots and lots of times. And you need to talk to them about it. like there's elected officials out there who don't know much about what net metering is. You know, they hear the idea of a solar tax, they're like, that sounds silly. And it's like, okay, well, who are they meeting with today? Are there a bunch of utility lobbyists who are going to talk with them and say, oh yeah, here's the math and here's the stuff and here's what it is and all the facts? Or are they going to meet you? Like, you know, is Scott, Kelly, or Joe, or any of the, you know, we have 712 member companies across the state. Like, are they meeting with the state senator and be like, hi, I know Edison tells you I'm a terrible person who's whatevering. I'm actually a small business owner, and here's what I do, and here's how it works. And like, and I've been in, you know, I've been in lobbying meetings. I've talked to a lot of elected officials, and frankly, a lot of the time they're like, okay, cool, electricity. That's very few people run to be in office because they care so much about electricity. They care about education, healthcare. There's a lot of other things they care about, and so it's really a great opportunity to be like, who's Joe? Like, let's talk about Solar Joe. And they're like, yeah, he's some guy and he trains people. And they're like, okay, like for good things or for bad things. And the enemies of solar who don't want you or Joe to succeed will be like, Joe, you know, he's like a cult leader. I don't know, with the haircut, like what's going on? And you're like, wait, no, I'm not. You're like, I'm busy. I haven't talked to these guys. I haven't talked to the elected officials. And it's like, okay, cool. So someone else is defining you to them. And this is, I think, a big part about solar people in politics is that we are running the table on popular opinion. Like at the end of the day, the solar army goes every day, knocks door to door, talking to folks saying like, hey, solar's great. Yeah, you in? Great. That's cool. But what that needs to do is translate from that into talking to the people who make political decisions. Because, you know, the utilities are not going door to door saying, hey, Joe's bad. I don't like Joe. Like they're not doing that. What they're going to do is go to lobbying meetings and, you know, various different events and talk smack about not Joe specifically, but, you know, people like Joe. And so why we as the California Solar and Storage Association exist and why our kind of parallel groups and sister groups across the state exist is because those are really important conversations to have with the elected officials, because they make huge decisions. You know, they make huge decisions that dictate whether or not you're going to be able to be successful. So like, you know, and just because it's a weird concept doesn't mean the state can't do it. And like, and also I know we're like, oh, it's all combative. Some of the stuff is not so high drama. So a big bill. So one of the big things that we as CalSA have been very successful at is streamlining permitting. I know from when I sold solar, I know from a lot of you all, one of the big frustrations is you get a customer, you knock on the door, you get them excited, you get them a quote. They're like, yeah, you get them to sign a contract. They're excited. There's the cooling off period. And they're like, okay, where's the construction crew? And you're like, oh, we filed with the city. We're waiting to get a permit. And in the next 5 days to 2 months, we'll get a permit. And then the construction crew comes out. You know, there's a homeowner's like, wait, you know, I thought we were like grooving and moving. And like, what do you say? And 2 months later. And so we as CalSA have gotten laws passed to streamline the solar permitting process in California, lower the costs, speed it up. And we have a law that's making its way through the legislature right now to kind of implement the solar app, which is more or less like an instantaneous permitting tool. And so stuff like that drops the soft cost. And that would be somewhere between like 5 cents to 20 cents a watt of savings just from like the speeding up time, which 5 to 20 cents a watt is a lot of savings to have. And plus speeding up that process from someone signs a contract to the project being interconnected is huge for referrals. And I know referrals are, you know, the magic word for a lot of you all. But there's a big difference. Like the longer someone goes from like, I had a great conversation with Joe, I signed a thing, I gave him a deposit, and now my electric bill went down. The longer that delay is, the less happy someone is. And so we've been working a lot on legislative policies to shrink that time, because at the end of the day, that's government, that's utilities, that's bureaucracy, that's all big legal fights. And that's a big thing that we as the California Solar and Storage Association work on in addition to the net metering fight and all these giant existential battles.
So you just brought it up. You know, this is for California. This is the California Solar and Storage Association. But
other states exist, yeah.
this is not just any state. Like this is California, right? So there's a big pattern. As California does something, it follows. So can you talk about how this can affect the rest of the country and even the rest of the world?
Yeah. So let's talk rest of the country and we'll talk rest of the world. But so one, just on a simple basis, so the other utilities, as we've seen in Florida and other markets, the other utilities are also going after net metering. On the simplest level possible, it's easy to imagine that if California guts net metering, drives 80% of solar folks out of business, that the utilities in other states are their attack ad right themselves. It's even California decided that net metering, and like it just they're like, oh, why would Texas have net metering if California doesn't? Like it would just be such a like. If your dentist told you that they stopped flossing, you'd be like, oh, okay, I'm not going to floss. Like that, like, regardless of where you are, what other state you're in, like that alone, it's its own big thing. The other part is, the utilities are trying out their playbook. Like politics and sports are very similar. The utilities, like, they're running their plays. Like, how do you destroy net metering in California, in a blue state, and all that stuff? And if they figure out the way to do it, they're going to copy and paste that across the country. And they're like, oh, well, here's, you do this, you do that, and then and boom, it goes away. So that's a big thing to keep in mind, that this is they're testing it out here. And so if this market goes away, this multi-gigawatt market goes away, they're coming for other states. And the big thing, I've been in solar for a long time. I'm very proud of that fact. We as the California Solar and Storage Association, we represent 70,000 workers. We have over 700 member companies. We are politically very large. We are politically very powerful. We can flex really hard. And this is like, if we can't win the fight here, if the California solar market can't politically organize and fight back strong enough to win, like other smaller markets, other places that are just getting started, they're going to be totally swamped. And frankly, even if we win, I mean, this whole thing is a huge issue for every other market, but especially new markets, because if you're a utility in a new state that has like a new solar situation, what you're looking at is like, okay, the lesson from California is, if you're a utility, it's like, don't let the solar industry get too big, because if it gets too big, then it's able to politically defend itself and you can't crush it. And so what you'll see in like Florida and other states is utilities just like going a lot harder to be like, got it, solar, not even once. Like, let's, that they're going to just be a lot more reactive to it. Because, when I was new in solar, like the utilities weren't particularly happy, but it's sort of like, oh, the solar industry, that's kind of cute. No, you're putting solar on a nonprofit, like, oh. And now it's like, they're like, it's like a baby tiger. And they're like, oh, that tiger is not like a baby anymore, and is speeding up permitting time. And wait, you're selling at $3 a watt? You're selling to just everybody in like Bakersfield and Fresno, and like people who couldn't care less about clean energy and the environment are signing up for solar, gobs and gobs. Like, oh, this is fundamentally restructuring the shape of the energy sector in California. That gets utilities scared. That gets people scared if they're the established interest. And so, I'm sure there's someone on the chat who will be like, here's what's happening in the Wyoming solar market. But like, if you're the utilities, you're like, oh, there's almost no solar sales here. You see California, you're like, got it, cool. Before the solar industry can politically mobilize, let's like make solar illegal in those places. So this is a big thing. So if you're in California, sign the petition, get people to sign the petition, come out to those rallies, get loud, call the governor. Frankly, it's stuff you're great at doing anyway. It's talk to people about solar. Just talk to them about this. And if you're in any other state or any other part of the world, a big thing to do is find your solar people, talk to elected officials. And there's probably a state level solar advocacy group, like there's the Colorado group, the Oregon, like there's a bunch of other ones. Get plugged in with them. And there's some sort of fight going on. There's some sort of something going on everywhere. Getting plugged in. And even if it's just like, frankly, one of my dreams, like every time you sell a project, every time a permit gets pulled for one of your solar clients, your state assembly member and congressperson and senator and state senator should get a postcard being like, hey, another happy solar customer in Tulare. That just helps them be like, hey, oh, this is happening. Like, it just, elected officials, they got a lot on their mind. There's a lot of issues in the world, as you hopefully know. And a big part is that we have the opportunity to say, hey, look, Joe's doing good stuff. Every day, Joe helps people help people. You listening in, you watching this, who sells solar, who does solar, you are helping people. You're helping your community. That's wonderful. Great job. You're a good person. If your elected officials don't know that, it is very easy for someone who has a bunch of money and a bunch of time and a bunch of lobbyists to go and talk all sorts of smack about you and say all sorts of weird things about you. And so it's really important that you go and you meet your elected officials. A lot of them already have solar, so you're probably not going to make that sale. But just like talking to them and saying, hey, this concept of a solar tax, fun fact, would be bad for me. Don't do that. And they're like, oh, okay, solar tax, bad. Like, you just got to be there and you got to talk to them. And, you know, it's not adversarial and it's not red or blue or whatever. It just, do they know you? And, you know, the great news is you are all charming, wonderful people. Joe helps you get more charming and wonderful each week. Like, this is all your skill set, which is like kind of a funny thing about solar. Like, this is just people who are great at talking to people. So talk to all the neighbors you talk to, all that stuff. And then also call the mayor and say, hey, by the way, I just sold 20 projects in the city. The permitting process is really slow. I'd appreciate if you did something about that. And it's like, the mayor is probably pro-business. They want their business they want stuff to be saving money and keeping it local. They want to cut red tape. Then hearing from you is great. No, the mayor's not going to be like, hey, I'm pro long permitting. Like, no one, that's not the thing. But if they don't hear from you, why would they help you out? If they don't know you, why would they help you out? They're not the mayor, the mayor of Cleveland, Ohio is not sitting around saying, how do I streamline? How do I make it so more people go solar? Like, they have a lot of other things they think about. But if you show up and say, hey, Mayor of Cleveland, Ohio, fun fact, the permitting process is terrible in the city for solar. Can you fix it? Here's what they do in Vermont. It's like a one-page thing. Or in California, they do a solar app. Can you just do that? The mayor in Cleveland's like, yeah, I mean, sure, why not? I like, clean government, fast government. Let's do that. It just, they're not going to help you. Like, don't ask, don't get, which you all know. That's the same in politics. You just got to do all those skills you already have and just apply to politics.
You bring it up, right? This is politics. This is political, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to get into the touchy subject of politics right now, but this is like where, not my question, but like a question from this community, maybe more layman's, is that California is supposed to be a liberal state, and like, why is this so hard for a liberal state to get solar going?
Yeah, no, a big question I get is people are like, hey, so Governor of Florida just vetoed an anti-solar thing, and the governor of California hasn't made a decision about this even larger anti-solar thing. What gives? And a big part is, so one, solar is not even bipartisan. Solar is transpartisan. Like, I talk to solar people up and down the state, all over the board, voters, non-voters, people who have all sorts of opinions on solar. People have all sorts of opinions on politics and who lives in the White House and all that stuff. Everyone likes solar. Everyone hates the utilities. Everyone likes saving money. All the other things, that's where stuff gets complicated. And a big part politically is the utilities in California are many things. They're not dumb, as we said. So they know how to say, hey, look, California's liberal. Solar, if you're going solar, you're hurting that person who doesn't have solar. Is their fake math that they throw up. And they say, look, we're going to do a bunch of solar. We're going to put it in the desert. We're going to own it. We're going to build the power lines. You don't worry your pretty little head. We don't need Joe involved in this. We got the solar thing. You're like, we'll still be a green state. And if you're, they're not attacking solar from like an anti-solar or an anti-clean energy or climate change thing. They're saying, no, they're doing the real work. And Joe, like what you're doing, your people, and like, the fact that 400 people went solar in California today, that's just children. That's just toys. It's like when you're learning to cook, or like, it's Thanksgiving, you're like, go in the kitchen, you're like, hey, mom and dad, or whatever, like, can I help out? And they're like, oh yeah, here's like a little dough, go play over there while they do the actual work. That's what they tell politicians we are. So like, and I've seen the attack ads. They're like, solar billionaires are screwing over low-income Californians with net metering. And it's like, I curse. This is being recorded. I have very strong feelings about those attack ads. But they have pictures and they send it to people in Sacramento. So like, just because, and and if this were happening in other states that were less liberal than California, they'd be hitting it in different angles. They'd be hitting at different things, because it's not about red or blue. It's about power, and all politics is about power. The red and blue, that's just like different hats for the stuff. And so a big part is saying like, hey, politicians, you got to fight back. And there's a lot of people who say, okay, well, California, everyone loves solar. There's all these people who have solar. Wouldn't they be up in arms? It's like, well, did you tell them about this? Did you invite them to these rallies? Did you say, hey, Fresno customers, you just signed up 20 people in Fresno in the last 2 months. Great. Did you tell them that PG&E is trying to shut this down and that they should need to show up at this rally on the 27th in Fresno to speak up? It's like, no. Okay, then why do you think they're going to show up? How do you think they're going to learn about this? Like, you all, and Joe, I'm trying not to pick on you. I'm just playful. But like, like you all know that you are the people, you're the reason people know what they know about solar, generally speaking. Like, that's people like, they're like, yeah, I Googled, and yay, maybe I went on Reddit. It's like, don't go on Reddit. Like your customers know about this because of you. And that's why it's so important that you point people to Save California Solar, because they don't, my friends know about this because this is all I talk about. But yeah, what's up?
So could you just brought it up? Speaking about customers or homeowners, I get a lot of questions from students and homeowners sometimes, and I want to make sure I answer this question correctly. So I'll make sure, see if you know the answer. Yeah. So with net metering, let's say PG&E, because I know every utility is different. Your homeowners will get grandfathered in supposedly for 20 years if they sign today, right? But this is the asterisk, is that when I saw NEM 3.0, they put a caveat is that they're going to take that 20 years and make it 15 years. Like, what's the point of having grandfathered into something that they can change later? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the proposal, which we can still stop, and that's why we need to do all that stuff, is part of the proposal. Not only does it hurt anyone who wants to go solar, it says if you signed up to go solar in the past, if you're on NEM 1 or NEM 2, you only get 15 years as opposed to 20. There's retroactive cuts, probably very illegal. Legal battles take a long time, though.
It's legal. So thank you. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It has to be illegal.
But that's also like a huge thing to bet on. It's like, oh, well, a court's going to figure this out in 3 years. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, you might be out of business and your customers might be furious and like run you out of town in that time period. So like, it's like, is solar going to be okay? It's kind of like, is the grid? It's like, you're not solar, you're Joe. You're, you all listening in and stuff. But yeah, so the proposal from the utilities is that retroactive cuts. So if you already have solar, that's part of what's on the thing. And that's why the Solar Rights Alliance, solarrights.org, is the outlet for solar customers. And they help them get organized, and they're, we're with them like peanut butter and jelly. That's where we're getting solar customers to speak out against it. So like just this morning, for example, the Utility Commission met in Southern California in a town called Diamond Bar. 44 people, all solar, either pros or solar customers, called in, showed up in person, spoke out, and they're like, hey, I know you're not voting on this thing today, but this is still really bad. And anytime you meet up, we're going to be there to tell you this is bad. Because that's the kind of stuff. Because, yeah, this retroactive cuts would be bad. Like, so some of you are newer. Like, as I've mentioned, I've been in solar for 15 years, 16 years. Like, there are people that I've helped put solar array. I didn't start in California, but like there are people who, there's 100,000 there's lots of people in California who have 14-year-old systems that if this goes through next year in January, they will have to start paying like $1,000 a year solar tax just to keep their system on. And someone who's had solar for 14 years and has a 14-year-old system and then starts having to pay $1,000 a year tax is going to have some very strong opinions about that, to put it gently. And so that's why what they need to do is talk to the government now, sign the petition now, rather than after the fact. Like, some of you might be in relationships or married or in love or whatever. It's a lot easier to do good things with your partner before you break up than after you break up. So like, do all the stuff now before any bad thing happens, and we can avert NEM 3. We can still win this. We just have to do the work. We just have to get people signing the petition and getting loud.
Yeah, and you are doing an amazing job. I love your personality, the way you explain things, your analogies make so much sense. It's easy to talk to you. So We love that you're advocating. You really, I started off with like, you are a solar superhero. You're helping save jobs, and you're out there fighting for us. And if we're not fighting with you, then what are we doing, right? So everybody, like, literally, if you're not there yet, go over there. SaveCaliforniaSolar.org.
Yeah.
I didn't want to hijack your whole presentation. Was there anything that I
I
wanted to
had some pretty pictures of the rallies themselves. I would say no, I mean, we really covered. We did the thing. I mean, the big thing is and if you go to calsa.org, there's the info about taking action, the events you can get on a newsletter. But if you're like starting at square one, best square one is savecaliforniasolar.org. Oh, hey Jamie and Joel, that's nice. Yeah, and the big thing also, if you're like, okay, cool, I just signed up to if you're listening into this and a lot of this is new and you're like, normally I feel so happy talking to Joe. This was like a bit of a bummer. I'm going to break it down. So the bad news is, yeah, this is happening. The good news is you are somebody. You have actually a lot more power and influence in this world than you think. And the skills that are needed right now are exactly the skills that you have. Getting people to sign the petition at savecaliforniasolar.org, including in your emails, your social media, your ads, whatever you're doing, saying, hey, sign the petition, protect solar. We'll take it from there. We'll get people plugged in. You all being that funnel, pointing people to there, that's the big thing. And the great news is we can win this fight. So some of you might remember the NEM 1 to NEM 2 switch that happened. It was kind of like the paint by numbers version of this fight. It was the undercard version of this fight, and we won that, and that was looking really dire. And we won that at the last minute. This is a harder fight. This is a bigger fight. People are not being gentle on this, but we can still win this. And the way we do it is we get lots and lots of folks. If the fix we're in, if Scott, if folks are saying like if Gavin Newsom didn't like solar, had it out for us, this whole thing, we'd have lost in January. Like the last 7 months, we'd have all been out of business. We all showed up. We all came to those rallies. We were all wearing the yellow shirt. We were all doing the stuff. He stepped in. He told the commission, like, hey, guys, not cool. And the commission was like, okay, we're going to think about this some more. In May, they came back and they had some clarifying questions that, it's like kind of like when you provide a solar quote for someone and you check it and they're like, let me think on it. It's cool. And you come back the next day and they're like, hey, question, how do solar panels work again? You're like, okay, I'm glad we're talking. Like, hey, we're talking. That's good. To ask me questions. That's not the question I was hoping you'd ask. And that kind of shows that we're in a weird place. Like politically, that's kind of what's happening right now. And so what we just need to keep doing is keep pushing, keep getting folks. Because like if we had 5 million people signing the petition, showing up at rallies, done deal. It'd be extremely easy for Gavin Newsom to show up and be like, PG&E rules, solar rules, let's yay net metering all day long. Like all we do is show the power of this industry, the political power, which just means you all are beloved folks. People, you are professionally charming. You get people to do things all the time. Ask them to do this. It's free. It's easy. It protects their investment. And we'll take it from there. But we can very much win this. And in the next 2 months next 2-3 months is kind of do or die time. So this is the time to do it. Don't be like, yeah, I'll do it after Halloween. Now.
My last question.
Yeah.
Let's say there's a solar pro out there who wants to help, wants to do everything, wants to do whatever they can, but they're just busy and they procrastinate and they just don't have a follow through. What's the minimum? What's like the least? Like if you're not going to do anything, do this, and this is going to help us at least. Yeah,
the least thing a person could do, and I know you're all good at your like CRMs and your marketing stuff. Text blast, email blast all your customers, all your leads, and say, hey, please sign this petition. Solar's under threat. It'd be a big help. It takes a minute. Please do that. Thanks. Let me know if you have any referrals for me for sales and all that stuff. Just if you did one blast, if everyone listening in just said, hey, everybody, sign this petition, we'll take it from there. Like once people sign the petition, one, that's very helpful. We'll do all the rest. We'll invite them to the rallies and the Fresnos and all that stuff. Just get people to the door. That's Save California Solar. So like put it on your Facebook, put it on your LinkedIn, your Twitters, your whatevers. and tell people, hey, sign the thing. Solar's under threat in California. And that's the square one. That's the step one. And you can pat yourself on the back afterwards.
I appreciate it. I think this is a great comment to leave off with here. Carter is doing amazing things to lead efforts to push back on NEM 3.0. So I 100% agree with that.
Thank you. Well, we got a solid team of 9 people here at CalSA, 9 of us on staff.
9 people, really?
Yeah. So I know some of you probably have a lot more of you working in your like teams and things like that. The size of the seatbelt, the Solar SEAL Team 6 is 9 people. But we have our allied groups, Solar Rights Alliance, and other folks that we bring in. But yeah, like you are talking to a significant percentage of people working on, like professionally working on this. So like when if you're like, oh, my door knockers, it's like, yeah, just get people, knock on the door, have the conversation, get them to sign the petition as well. That's great. That is huge. That's what we need.
That is awesome. This whole thing was awesome. I really appreciate you getting on here. Everybody watching, if you liked what Carter's doing and you appreciate him, go ahead and comment, say what's up to him. Carter, anything else? If anybody wants to reach out to you, they want to work with you, they want to follow you, they want to, social media, what's the best way to stay contact?
Yeah. Best thing to do is send me an email, carter@calsa.org, carter@calssa.org. Shoot me an email. I'm there. You can do the info@calsa. That also goes to me. But Carter@calsa. And yeah, if you're like, hey, Carter, love the presentation. Quick question. What's net metering? What do I do? What was that website? Cool. Like I'm happy to have the intro conversation all day long. It's a big part of it. And I'll see you on the road. So if you're in San Diego, Bakersfield, all those other cities, I'm about to log like 1,500 miles in the next 2 weeks. So you'll see me getting increasingly sunburned as time goes on. But like if you're in Fresno on the 27th, come on out to downtown Fresno, and I'll see you there.
And don't forget to accept my friend Facebook request. Okay, don't forget, I put you on there. We got another comment. Thank you guys. Thanks, Carter, for being on here. Everybody watching, we're gonna have another webinar in a couple of weeks. We're gonna have friend of the Solar Academy, Johnny Ringo, is gonna bring Tyler Mashkow. We're gonna do a little training on building commercial partnerships, which I'm sure a lot of people are gonna be interested in. So Carter, again, thank you for getting on here. Danny Pesci out there, thanks for getting us connected. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Danny.
I'll do it again, man.
Okay.
We're out.
We're out.